Welcome back to Blue Steel Talks. We're with Hussein
Al-Mayyahi.
Al-Mayyan. And he has an interesting background in history that I think is very instructive, especially as it turns into his business and ventures and endeavors today.
Well, thank you, Dave, for having me. I'm excited to be on Blue Steel Talks.
So let's just say that your background is somewhat unusual. Why don't you tell us about it, starting with you were not born in Iraq, but your parents were.
Yes, sir. So my parents were born in Iraq. They were born and raised in Iraq. At the time, my father was a young man who was unfortunately in the Iraqi military. By that time, as soon as you turn 18, you're forced to join the military. Mm-hmm. It was a mandatory thing. If you don't, they will execute you.
Well, that is persuasive.
Which is very persuasive. They lived in fear. The image that was portrayed outside of Iraq was much different than the image that was actually being seen inside of Iraq. In such a matter of death was such a common thing that as soon as you whisper the dictator's name, if you say something bad about the dictator, if you say something bad about anything related to him, they will send their ex-forces and they will take you for interrogation and to black sites that you'll never be seen again, which is a very dark history to come back from. But tying back to the story, my father was born and raised in Iraq. My mother was born and raised in Iraq. They have seen things that many people will never recover from. The stories that my father would tell me about Iraq, because I didn't experience it, 5 of my siblings did. And the other 2, which was me and my sister, we were born in Jordan. So my father fled the country in 1996. And at that time, Saddam Hussein was out to execute anybody that was not willing to serve the military again.
So the act of leaving was a capital offense?
Yes. The act of leaving was a capital offense of death by execution, not only to the men, but to the whole entire family, which is something unheard of and something very, very scary to be living in. At that time, my siblings were actually telling me the stories of them crossing the borders, not knowing if they're gonna make it or not. Mm-hmm. It was a 7-hour ride in a car. But my father left a year before my mother and my siblings did, just to ensure that there was a living. Mm-hmm. And at the time, my dad was actually well established in Iraq and such. He had stores, he had companies, and he had investments. He left it all behind. Went and start over as a handyman, somebody that you pick up from the street on the side to ask to work as a day laborer. He started working as a laborer all over again, from owning businesses to starting completely over.
And that's in Jordan.
And that was in Jordan.
Mm-hmm. Now you are in Jordan, or you're born in Jordan. They are in Jordan, yes. But they have no legal right to be in Jordan.
No legal rights. We came for asylum, but we were only accepted for 6 months, but we stayed there for 17 years. After the 6-month period, we didn't have a choice. If we were caught, we were sent back. As soon as we get sent back, two options would have happened: execution on the border or lifetime in prison, just for fleeing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people fled, and unfortunately some people got caught and they were executed or imprisoned and tortured to extents where they're unrecognizable. And after Saddam Hussein got taken down, they found their bodies and they found their remains. So we stayed in Jordan for 17 years. My father was an engineer. He was a civil engineer at the time, and he tried to work with no papers, and unfortunately most of the contractors over there would hire him and completely eliminate all the rights he has. So a regular engineer would be paid $3,000, for example, $3,000, and they would pay my father $100. And think about it that way: you have 7 siblings, you have 7 kids, and you have a household that is starving daily, and you bring back $100 to try to feed your family. Yeah. Let alone the rent, the bills, and everything. So at the end of the month, we would be struggling to even find food. It's just it kind of brings back all the memories, this flashing back, which is
I can
something that
imagine.
we really don't think about often because it's just horrible years that we've experienced.
How old were you when you left Jordan?
So when I left Jordan, I was around 11 years old.
Okay. How did your father manage that, getting you out?
My father used to work
You're
6.
not, 9 people is not exactly subtle.
Yes, sir. And I always tell him about this. I'm like, you should have pulled out. you should have managed having kids better. But it's in the culture to have a lot of kids, and we didn't expect to move. We were not expecting to travel and to start over 3 separate times.
Right.
So my father managed it by working 16 hours a day, and actually it's a lot that goes to my mother because she managed the spendings in a very manner way where she made sure that she doesn't overspend on anything. To the point where when we go shopping for food, we'd actually get the rotten parts or the fruits that are about to be rotten because they're cheaper. And my mom would cut the rotten part off and we would eat the rest of the fruit or the rest of the food. Vice versa with everything else. There were days that we didn't have food, Dave. There were days that we didn't eat. We'd go ask our neighbors for some food, and sometimes they would give us, and sometimes they wouldn't. So we've seen the worst part of it, but they managed, and it's not really a story.
All of this in fear that you're going to be sent back.
Yes, and my dad he got caught a few times. My brothers got caught a few times working illegally, and my dad actually started building connections with the Jordanian governors and stuff by working on their projects and building a good relationship with them, and he got
Smart
them
man.
out. Yeah, he got them out because they were gonna get deported very quickly. As soon as they catch you, no papers, you're gone, and God knows what's gonna happen to you on the other side.
I understand. So how did he get out of Jordan? And he came from Jordan to the United States?
Yes, sir. So as soon as my father was a smart man for doing this, as soon as he landed in Jordan, one of his friends actually told him about the UN, to go apply for the UN in hopes that we will get accepted to go to Europe, United States, any Canada, just any different any other country that's not back Jordan or
Right. Yes,
that's
right.
not back to Iraq or in Jordan. So he went and applied for the UN. He put all of our names except for my oldest brother, because at the time my oldest brother was still in Iraq. And that point, we waited 17 years until we got accepted.
Wow.
17 long years. My sister actually got married to an individual that is Iraqi, and he lives here in Washington. And he knew my sister through a family friend, and the family friend knew my father. So they actually flew down, asked my sister's hand in marriage. They got married, and my sister flew out here. So this was one of the main reasons why we actually landed in Seattle.
So she was the first one
She
to
was the
come
first one here, yes. But we got accepted as a family, and they
Right.
asked us if we had any relatives or anybody that was in America. So this is why we're in the United States.
Got it.
Or sorry, Seattle.
While you're in the Seattle area, sure.
Washington. Yes, sir.
Why the United States? I mean, I understand that there's a reason for it because she was here.
Yes.
But you said earlier, when we were off camera, there were reasons why the United States was the goal.
The United States was the goal because Iraq was just not a place to live in anymore. A lot of people don't accept it, and actually a lot of people would like to go back. My mother was one of them. My mother wanted to go back to Iraq very, very badly because of my oldest brother. He didn't unfortunately have the chance of coming here with us because of his papers, and he got held back, and now his permanent residency is still in Iraq, and we're still trying to get him out here. And why in Iraq, or sorry, why the United States? The one main reason is for safety. We did not have any safety.
No, I can imagine.
At the times, to give you a brief backstory, Dave, this is a haunting story where my father would, walk out the door and see grown men hanging from light bulbs, just to set as an example. And when he's in the military, he was in the back end on comms. He would see fields of bodies, just both sides. It was Saddam Hussein was a very cruel man, where he didn't leave it up to chance. So he would nuke both sides, his allies and his enemies, just so he can guarantee a win-win. So the stories is safety. Most important was safety, and we just couldn't do it anymore.
I can definitely understand that. For all of our flaws, we don't have that one.
Yeah.
And how has that affected you?
That affected me in multiple ways. First of all, in viewing life, in viewing freedom as more than just to lash out. The way I see it here, freedom is becoming more evil than people are realizing it. It's consuming them, and it's doing things to people that are they feel like they're forced to act upon that word and to act upon freedom itself, and they can do exactly whatever they want and whenever they want. That is freedom, but the freedom that we were looking for is to be as far away from death.
There's a phrase, an old phrase, liberty, they say, but they mean license.
Yes.
And so, yes, freedom does not mean irresponsibility. Freedom means the choice.
Yes.
And you're correct on that.
Go ahead.
You obviously have a head on your shoulder. We've talked a lot besides just in this interview. But you're not overcautious. How did you manage to get the right balance between caution and adventureness?
The adventureness was actually the opposite of my dad. My mom and my father, they have experienced so much that they become overly cautious.
I can believe it.
They enclosed.
If a misspoken word can get you shot,
Yes.
You learn to be cautious.
So they enclosed off from the world, where anything that may seem dangerous, they will push it away. If things are dangerous, the idea that comes across their mind, they'll push it away. So when I've seen that for a very long time, most people would kind of cave into that mentality and cave into that atmosphere, but I tried my best to not to. I didn't want to live the life that they lived, which is terror, murder.
You didn't want the fear that they grew up with, where the fear was real, to
Yes.
carry on where it was unnecessary.
And it's still to this day where they carry the fear, and it's still to the day where they're still connected back home in the wars that's happening. But the way that I overcame that, Dave, is just by trying. Because the way we lived was so enclosed for a very long time, I had to break free from that. So I found a balance by trying and failing. Sometimes I went overboard. Sometimes, I've done multiple things in my life where I regret, and I've done stupid things. And that was a good learning curve for me, knowing that, okay, this is a little bit too far from me, so maybe I can just tone it a little bit back until I found the balance.
If you haven't done things you regret, you haven't lived.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, but that's true. I don't mean you go out and do things that are really bad, but I mean you're now engaged in Berkeley Media.
Yes, sir.
And in entrepreneurship. How did you get there from a 11, 12-year-old boy coming to the United States for the first time? How did you get there? How did you make the transition?
So the transitions really happened was way before I became a videographer. I always had a hobby for cameras. I always had a hobby for images and cameras. And by the way, I am the main videographer for Berkeley Media, just an FYI. So before all of that, I started a few micro businesses. I started a teeth whitening business. I started I believe it was a small, drop shipping business that didn't succeed. And I also worked with a family business. My brother owns a construction company. He's been doing it for 10 years, and I have been helping him for the last 7 years. I was a kid, I was very young when I was working with him, so I was learning as I was going. And in that mentality of never work for a corporate company, always repeated in my head. I never wanted to work for a corporate company.
Right, you didn't want a job.
It's a dead end.
Yeah, it's a dead end. It is a dead end.
I did my research, Dave. I looked around and I seen that most people are miserable. And they just don't realize it, but they are financially tied. I never wanted to be financially tied and never wanted to depend on a company, such as an external company where you have a boss and somebody that has a boss, and they can kind of let you go whenever.
I remember my father said once, don't let a wife and kids and a mortgage tie you to a job you hate.
Yes.
And I've never been tied to any job, so it was easy. But, yeah, so that's a very good thing to learn, especially if you're coming from a place where caution was the watchword. Yes. You would tend to want to go to work for a company that you worked for 40 years.
Yes. And we've started over 3 times. We moved to 3 different countries. We started over 3 times, Dave. Starting over was not a fear of mine.
No, I can see that.
Starting over was, I embrace starting over. It sucks. It's it's not, excuse me, it sucks. It's not easy to start over, and it's not easy to see all of the dominoes that you put up so carefully just cave in and fall. Mm-hmm. So starting over was always a welcoming thing for me. For example, I've started over with when construction, I did a few projects on the side, and then I picked up a camera on the side, and I really fell in love with the camera. And that's when I decided that maybe it's time for me to start over. Mm-hmm. So I left construction, completely bailed on it, and my family understood, and started from scratch, Dave. There were months and months where I honestly didn't know it was going to work out. Mm-hmm. Projects for free, photos for free. I've shot engagements for free, just so I can gain the experience. And I loved it. I loved every version of it.
Excellent. Obviously, you somehow got connected with Brixley Media.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Anthony. Anthony happened.
Like with all of us.
Yeah. So I was a year into my company, and I started building I started building a steady revenue, mm-hmm. which was, I believe I had 3 clients at the time where they were satisfied with my work and they loved my work. And slowly but surely, we stayed together for 7 months, because the first few months of the company, there were just trial and errors. Mm-hmm. And Anthony actually reached out to me on social media, gave me his phone number. We hopped on a phone call, and the first conversation struck me as, hey, I love your work. You do amazing work. Would you be okay to be freelanced? Mm-hmm. And, come shoot videos for my clients. I have a lot of clients, and I really want you to help me out because I'm running low on videographers. So that was the conversation that sparked. And then an hour and a half later, me and him were chatting about companies, and he said, would you be interested in starting a company?
It sounds so like Tony. Okay.
He said, would you be interested in starting a company? And in my mind, Dave, it was an instant no. Because having partners can go really well or really bad. Mm-hmm. And
yep.
I'm pretty sure
I've had both.
I'm pretty sure
I've had both. Yep.
Both. Mm-hmm. And it's always the first bad taste in your mouth that really ruins the rest.
Yep, I agree.
So that was my biggest fear. My second thing was, I have a thing going, but I wanted more. Mm-hmm. I wanted more in regards of more revenue and more money. And in the long run, the vision, I actually didn't see myself going more. Because I probably gave or take another 2 years before I kind of burn out of doing the same thing over and over again and managing the company by myself. So I looked at it in 2 ways. Obviously, the scared side of me that comes from my family said no. But the logical side and the brave side of me said, let's give it a shot. Mm-hmm. First of all, having partners is not a bad idea. Mm-hmm. You divide the load, mm-hmm. and everybody can manage their own roles, and you can move. If you want, and this is a quote that I actually really, really love. It says, if you want to move fast, go alone. If you want to go long, have partners. Mm-hmm. Or further, sorry.
If you want to go further,
have partners.
That's true.
So that is a sentence, and that is a statement in my mind. The quote that I really love, I took that quote and I actually tried it out. Mm-hmm. And for the first 6 months, we were at a halt with Brixley Media. No income, no business, and no nothing. And I was actually excited. I was very happy about that, because if we got clients right off the bat and we're not compatible with each other,
oh yeah,
it would have felt like dominoes. Mm-hmm. So I was very excited that we didn't have business. Believe it or not.
I'm sure the rest of you weren't that excited, but
Yeah, but as soon as I got to know them, Theo and Anthony, I started to see their characters. And you really judge a man's character in three aspects. You judge them with women. You see how they react around women. You judge them with money, and you also judge them with hard situations. See how they are in hard situations.
Oh, yeah.
So it's those three situations that I've kind of had the opportunity to try them out in, and they really did pass those situations. Some men unfortunately can't handle themselves around women, and they completely fold.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but that's how I knew that they were good partners.
Good. And obviously it's proving to be that way. And as I've mentioned before, I am a client of Brixley Media and fully endorse their work. What would you advise a young entrepreneur starting out? How should they approach the problems of starting?
Fail. If you
Fail often and fail quickly.
If you fail and you learn to taste the bitterness with joy, you will go very far in life. If you let that burn you and scare you from the kitchen, you're not going to go that far.
Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah. The fastest you fail, the more you learn. The more you fail, the more you'll understand. And there was actually another quote that said, if I told you that you're only 10 fails away from becoming a millionaire, how excited would you be for your first fail?
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
You would be very excited to fail.
You'd be very excited.
You failed the first time, now you're only nine fails away from reaching your goals. So failing was probably the best advice that I've received from a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of men that have crossed those paths that that I love to cross at a certain point and become where I want to become in the future. So failing was probably the best thing to absorb. It wasn't easy. It's
No,
never
of course
easy.
it's not easy.
And you can obviously talk about
I
it.
can relate.
We can leave a whole entire show about just failing and the misery that comes with failing, but it's very necessary.
It's essential.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. It feels like my story is very common in this. So thank you very much, Hussein.
Thank you so much, Dave, for having me on the show.
For being on this side of the camera for a change.
Yes, sir. I'm always on the back, but this time we're in front of the camera. Thank you guys so much.
And thank you all. See you all next time.
Sir.